swooping is this concept that we came up with many, many years ago, and we use it regularly now. And it's not emotional for me now as I use it, but as we describe those feelings that I felt at the beginning of the concept of swooping, I got really emotional talking to Garth about it. So I wanted to give you that preface as you enter into this Taco Tuesday podcast. Hi, I'm Jamie Braithwaite.
And I'm Garth Braithwaite.
And we are here on Taco Tuesday.
Yes. And we had big things to talk about. Oh, you want to talk about swooping?
I do want to talk about swooping. So I think the first time that we figured it out, we were on Ferguson. So it was about 2010. It was right around the time JOYrific came out.
And it wasn't stated as like a nice thing.
No, I was actually really pissed off.
Wow. There's some strong language.
I was really mad because I would be like taking care of the kids. You'd come in.
It was stressful and stimulating to deal with many small children at the same time. And it just seemed like the other person who was well rested and separate from this chaos. It didn't mean that I didn't come in with my own stress, right? Like being at work at that time for me was stressful as well. But seeing my family was a reset from that stress. It was new. It was different stress.
Yeah, and I like didn't really have a reset.
No. And that's a very common thing for a stay-at-home parent is you're in it and you feel guilty that you feel overstimulated about it.
Yeah.
Like it's a very common thing to be like, my family's the most important thing in the world to me. Why don't I like to be around them? Like that should be stated more. Like that's a normal thing to have happen.
Yeah.
And it's not abnormal. And it's true of pretty much anything we love. Anything you love, if you had to do it 24 hours a day with nothing else, don't think you'd love it that much.
Yeah, and if you listen to the podcast with Matt, he talks about toxicity and how him and his friend had the same classes together and they were best friends, but they reached this like toxicity level where if you're around each other and he figured it out. It was 7 hours around this certain friend, 7 hours nonstop around this friend. Their toxicity level was too much.
Yeah.
And not saying that that's how it is with kids, but
no, it is.
That's how it feels.
Yeah, it's a certain amount. Yeah. And Jamie has had the app on her, the complication on her watch that would show it getting loud.
The hearing loss app.
Yeah, and it just
loud environment.
And it got to show the kids visually that they were loud, and it was noticeable, and it helped confirm to Jamie, yeah, things are loud and overstimulating in this environment right now. So completely fair, right? Like you were overstimulated with good reason, but it very easily turns into power struggles. Like
yeah. Well, and I had a 5'3" and a baby.
Right.
And
you need the 5-year-old to be helping a little bit more.
Yeah.
You need some of those unsupervised tasks that they can.
Oh, yeah.
And all those things are not exactly reasonable.
Well, and like I look at my 5-year-old now and like I
couldn't change a
expect
baby's diaper.
So little of her, and I expect so much of my 18-year-old. And then it's going to be the same in reverse, right? Like when I guess it's not reverse. It's just going to be the same when my 5-year-old now is 18.
I don't think it'll ever be the same. That's part of the unfairness of being the older sibling.
Well, and that's what I've said to her, the oldest, you're my first 18-year-old and the baby is my 7th 5-year-old.
Yeah.
I really figured out how to raise a 5-year-old at this point. Oh, which goes back to that one quote that you had.
You grow up with your firstborn and you raise your last child. Your kids experience different parents. I experience different parents than mine. And that's another thing that you and I both share is that neither of us are the oldest.
Right. We're both 4 of 5.
Yeah. Close to the tail end. We were seen as both of us were seen as helpful kids in our house.
Like I'm the favorite.
Yeah.
I'm also the only girl. I have 4 brothers, and you have 4 boys and 1 girl as well. And then here we are with 5 girls, 2 boys. It's a very different
dynamic.
dynamic.
And we live in a different time and we live in a different place. Like, so it's interesting. Our experience as a child in a family does not qualify us for being parents.
Yeah. But it definitely shapes us. Like last night when we did dinner with your parents, there's a lot of conversation. Like it's an interesting turn because you are very knowledgeable and they rely on that knowledge. It's an interesting turning. And we're at that sandwich point. Like, I don't know what they call it. They call it like sandwich. We're raising children. We're also helping with our parents. And it's a lot of responsibility. So let's talk about swooping.
So swooping turned into not necessarily a positive turn. I think it is positive now.
I think it's positive now. I think at the time I was...
Yeah, but it's more now a state of a fact, right? Like it's just the name for what we need. And we've gotten better at voicing what we need.
Oh, that's good. That's actually really good.
Yeah, so it just becomes a shorthand for I'm in a power struggle and I'm recognizing that I'm not going to win this because there is no winning power struggles, but I can't see the way out.
Yeah, I've like painted myself into a corner.
Yeah, and so I need someone to come swoop and get me out of this. Or it's just I'm overstimulated, and if the next person comes and talks to me about something, or if I hear another kid scream, or if I hear another kid tell me no when I ask them to do something, I'm going to lose it. And it's probably not their fault.
So at work, I do a really interesting technique. I'm remote, and we record a lot of our meetings, mostly because I'm overtraining, and we take a lot of our meetings, and it turns into training. But there are times where people get frustrated and have power struggles in a corporate setting. And I was talking to one of my vice presidents once and said, being recorded changes how you behave.
Yeah.
And then I was talking to him about JOYrific and things like that. And I talked to him about how like my kids could record me. And he's like, whoa, that's a really vulnerable. For you to give your kids permission to record you when you are like in a power struggle. And not that our kids pull out their phones and record me, but I always have that in mind of if this was being recorded, I don't want those clips to be taken out of context. And I think that that's partly where I want to make sure that, I don't know.
There's going to be a lot of mercy.
And like what happens behind closed doors, like that's a thing, right? Like people are at their worst.
But at the same time, I think people need to be allowed. They have the right to not be perceived once in a while. Like our kids, they don't necessarily need privacy, right? Like it's not like that everyone needs their own space where they absolutely are completely private. But they do deserve to not have parents watching everything they're doing all the time. And that's something that you and I got to benefit from our generation. We would get home from school sometimes. Our parents were there.
Yeah, we were like turnkey kids.
Yeah. And all of my friends were, right? Like my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she was still doing things. And so it wasn't unusual for me to get home and no one was home. I knew what to do if that was the case. Our kids aren't experiencing that. Like
because we're always around.
We're always home. And they deserve to figure out how to be people without parents in the room. So, but I agree with you. It's a good thought experiment for us as parents, as adults, because we have hopefully a bit more of formed brains, right? Like hopefully. But we should think about it. All right, well, if someone else was to walk in and this was happening, how would that change my behavior? That's really good. I think that's a good thought experiment to think through, especially when we're in power struggles. Because if we got our power struggles filmed, I don't think we'd be the heroes of the situation.
No.
You just see adults bullying small children because we're in the position of authority. And us being frustrated that they somehow can't do all the tasks that we want them to do.
And I think that, like going back to, I've had 7 5-year-olds now, right? Like I definitely didn't do it right on my first one. Probably barely learned on my second one. By the third one, I'm like, okay, something is amiss. I got to figure this out. Now, we're able to go back. And so that's where we get to swooping. So I guess from my experience of having 7 toddlers, swooping is the thing that we have come up with that has helped us. And I don't think if I had not had 7 toddlers, I never would have come up with swooping.
And we are in a very privileged place right now where if you need swooping, I can swoop just about any time of day.
Yeah.
And it's not
almost
perfect
immediately. I mean, unless you're in a work meeting.
If I'm in a work meeting, or if you're like, there are circumstances where we can't. But there were earlier times in our lives where I was not home.
No, it was like 2 hours before the swooping would take place.
But sometimes it's just knowing that swooping will happen.
Yeah.
And I always appreciated the heads up, like hey, I've had a really hard day. And like there were times when we were first figuring this out. It was normal when we lived in Utah, where I'd get a call at like 4:55 of like, just checking, are you coming home straight after work today?
It's like the bewitching hour at between 4:30 and 5:15. If I didn't have contact and knew, like I had gotten to the end of my...
It's like running a race and you saw, like your brain was like 4. That's almost 5. I'm almost done doing this alone. And so it's very easy to kind of slow down the running because you see the finish line.
Yeah. And then on cases where the finish line then turned into 8 p.m.
Yeah. If I had to work late.
Yeah. It was hard. I think it was really hard.
And we did get better at like, I would come home, help with the bedtime routine.
Yeah.
And then I would go back to work.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on today. These like are deep emotions that have been hard for me. That's part of JOYrific is like, I don't know, your hippocampus, your amygdala.
What's the sign off that I'm supposed to do? I think we just end it like your dad ends phone calls.
He just hangs up.
Yeah, he just...